Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something that's pretty interesting, I think. At least I hope you will. We're going to be looking at commonly mispronounced English words.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah. So this is based on an article we found about common words that even native English speakers mispronounce.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many there are.
Exactly. And we thought it'd be fun to go through some of these and see if maybe we've been saying them wrong too.
Yeah,
And also just kind of talk about like why these words are so tricky.
absolutely. I think it'll be fun.
So to start off,
Mm.
um, I know for a fact I have mispronounced this word, and I'm curious if you have as well. How do you say this word?
Which word?
Espresso.
Espresso.
Yeah, I've definitely said espresso before,
Yeah.
especially like when I'm at a coffee shop trying to sound all fancy.
Oh, yeah, the infamous espresso. I've
Right.
definitely heard that one a lot. And I understand why people say it.
Hmm.
You know, you've got words like express and expensive. Our brains just want to make those connections.
Totally. It's like our brains are trying to trick us.
They are. They really are. But the correct pronunciation is just a nice, simple espresso.
Espresso. Okay, I'm going to try to remember that one. So it seems like a pretty simple word. Why do you think so many people get it wrong?
I think it's a few things. Partly it's because of those other words we were talking about that sound similar, but also English spelling can be pretty confusing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's not always phonetic. You know, English has borrowed words from so many different languages over the centuries, and that's led to a lot of these little quirks in pronunciation,
Right. It's like English doesn't want to follow its own rules.
pretty much.
Okay, let's move on to another word that I think a lot of people mispronounce. And this one I've definitely been guilty of myself. How do you say this word?
Want to make one?
Mischievous.
Mischievous.
Okay, so you don't say mischievous.
Yo, mischievous? 2 syllables less.
2 syllables less. Wow. I've been adding extra syllables this whole time. It's like I was trying to make the word longer.
It happens. It's that silent I after the V that trips people up.
The silent I,
Mm.
right? So it's all about those little details, those subtle sounds that can really change the way a word is pronounced.
Exactly. And it's important to get those details right because, clear communication is key. And if we're not pronouncing words correctly, it can lead to misunderstandings.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
Especially for people who are learning English as a second language. Those little differences can be really hard to pick up.
For sure, it can make English seem even more daunting than it already is.
Okay, well, let's give those English learners another word to practice. How do you say this next one?
Let's see. I think we should go with salmon.
Salmon. Okay, I know I've gotten this one wrong before. Is it salmon or salmon?
It's salmon. That L is silent.
Salmon. Wow. I always feel like I'm saying it wrong when I drop that L.
I know, it feels counterintuitive, but if you look at the history of the word, it actually makes sense. Salmon comes from the old French word saumon, and over time that L sound just faded away.
Oh, wow. So it's not that we're mispronouncing it. It's more like the language itself changed over time.
Exactly. It's a beautiful example of how language evolves.
I love that. It's like words have their own little evolutionary journeys.
They do, and sometimes those journeys take unexpected turns.
Speaking of unexpected turns, let's try another word. This one often sparks a bit of debate.
Mm.
How do you say this word?
Which one are you thinking of?
Often.
Often.
Do you say often with the T, or do you go for often?
I've heard both, and honestly, both are considered acceptable.
Really?
Yeah, often, with the silent T. It's a bit more traditional, and maybe a little more formal. It's the pronunciation you might use in a presentation or a job interview. But in casual conversation, often is perfectly fine.
So it's like choosing the right outfit for the occasion.
Exactly. You wouldn't wear a ball gown to the grocery store.
I definitely wouldn't. So I guess with pronunciation, it's all about knowing your audience and adapting your language accordingly.
Absolutely. It's about using language as a tool and
Yeah.
choosing the right tool for the job.
Okay, I like that analogy. So it's not always about right or wrong. It's about using language in a way that's effective and appropriate for the situation.
Precisely.
This is making me think about how much thought actually goes into something as seemingly simple as pronunciation.
You too. It's definitely more complex than we often realize.
It's not just about saying words correctly. It's about understanding the nuances of formality, informality, regional variations, historical shifts. So like there's this whole hidden layer of meaning embedded in pronunciation.
There is, and it's fascinating to uncover those layers.
Okay, I think my mind is officially blown. I need a moment to process all of this.
Take your time.
Yeah.
Language can be overwhelming, but it's also incredibly beautiful and rewarding to study.
Okay, I'm ready for more. Let's tackle another word that often trips people up, especially when they try to pronounce every single letter. How do you say this word?
Lay it on me.
February.
February.
So you don't skip over that first R.
Nope. That first R is important. February, not February.
February. Okay. I'm going to have to practice that one. It feels a little awkward to say that first R.
It does take some practice, but it's worth it. You know, the word comes from the Latin februarius, which referred to a Roman purification festival. And over time, the pronunciation evolved, but that first R stuck around.
Wow. So even a word like February has this whole history behind it.
It does. Every word has a story to tell.
I love that. So maybe we mispronounce words because we're not aware of their origins.
I think that's definitely part of it. We get so focused on the rules and the mechanics that we sometimes forget that words have these rich histories.
That's a great point. I'm going to start thinking about words as little time capsules carrying echoes of their past.
I like that. That's a beautiful way to think about it.
Okay, back to February. Do you think mispronouncing this word actually hinders our ability to communicate? I mean, people generally understand what we mean, even if we don't say it perfectly right.
You're right. It probably won't cause a major communication breakdown, but I think it can affect how we're perceived, especially in professional settings. Clear and accurate pronunciation. It can convey confidence and credibility.
That makes sense. It's like dressing for success. You want to make a good impression.
Exactly. It's all about using language to present ourselves in a positive light.
Okay. I'm starting to see how pronunciation can be a powerful tool, not just for communication, but for self-presentation as well.
Absolutely. It's a subtle but important aspect of how we use language.
This is really fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much from this deep dive. It's not just about pronunciation. It's about understanding the art of language itself.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. There's so much to explore when it comes to language.
I'm ready for more.
Yeah.
What other pronunciation mysteries do we have to unravel?
Oh, we've only just begun.
I can't wait.
Let's see.
Oof, the suspense is killing me.
How about this word? How do you say it?
Which one?
Coupon.
Coupon. Now, I've heard people say coupon, but something about that has always sounded off to me.
You're right. It's not coupon. It's coupon.
Coupon. Okay, so it rhymes with moon.
Exactly.
Coupon.
Yeah.
Got it. I'm starting to realize how much we rely on our intuitions when it comes to pronunciation. We hear a word a certain way,
Yeah.
and we just assume that's how it's supposed to be said. But as we're seeing today, those intuitions can be misleading.
They can. And that's why it's important to be open to learning new things and to questioning our assumptions about language.
So it's like we need to double check our linguistic maps every now and then.
Exactly. Make sure we're not going down the wrong path.
Okay, well, I'm definitely feeling a lot more aware of those linguistic paths and the importance of staying on track.
That's great to hear. And I think that's a great place to pause for now.
Oh, already?
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we've got plenty more pronunciation adventures in store for you.
Oh, good. Because I'm just getting warmed up.
I knew you'd say that. I can't wait to share more of these fascinating words with you.
I'm excited to hear them.
All right, we'll be back soon, so stay tuned.
Right, see you then. Bye.
All right, so we're back, and we're ready to tackle some more commonly mispronounced words.
I'm excited to see what you've got for us.
All right, well, let's start with one that I know causes a lot of debate, especially among my friends who are from England. How do you say this word?
Which one?
Herb.
Herb?
Do you say herb with the H, or do you go for herb?
You know, that's a great example of how pronunciation can vary depending on where you're from.
Right. Like, is there a right way to say it?
Well, in American English, herb without the H is definitely more common.
Yeah, that's how I say it.
But in British English, herb is the preferred pronunciation.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about knowing the correct pronunciation. It's also about being aware of these regional differences.
Exactly. Language is always evolving and adapting to different cultures and contexts.
So it's like there's a whole hidden map of pronunciation out there, with different accents and pronunciations marking the linguistic landscape.
I love that analogy. It's like a linguistic treasure map. All right, well, let's keep exploring this map and see what other treasures we can find. What's the next word?
How about this one? Subtle.
Subtle. Okay, I've definitely heard people say subtle with a clear B sound.
Yeah, that's a common mistake.
Is that B silent?
It is. It's subtle.
Subtle. Okay, so it rhymes with shuttle.
Exactly. Another sneaky silent letter.
These silent letters are really tripping me up. It makes me think about how hard it must be to learn English as a second language.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity.
I have so much respect for anyone who's learning English. It's a tricky language.
It is, but it's also a beautiful and rewarding language to learn.
Okay, let's move on to a word that's often mispronounced in the tech world. How do you say this word?
Hit me with it.
Data.
Data.
Do you say data or data?
Another great example of regional variation.
Oh, really?
In American English, data is more common.
That's how we usually say it.
But in British English, data is the preferred pronunciation.
So it's like those two dialects are having a little pronunciation battle.
They are, and it's fascinating to see how these differences play out in real-world conversations.
So like language is this living, breathing thing that's constantly changing and evolving.
Exactly, and those changes can be influenced by all sorts of factors. Geography, culture, technology, you name it.
I'm starting to see how pronunciation is so much more than just saying words correctly. It's about understanding the history, the culture, the nuances of how language is used.
Absolutely. It's about appreciating the complexity and the beauty of language.
Okay. I'm feeling very inspired to keep learning and exploring. What other pronunciation gems do you have for us?
Well, how about this word? It's often mispronounced in the world of finance. How do you say this one?
Let's hear it.
Interest.
Interest, I say interest, with the emphasis on the second syllable.
You got it. That's the correct pronunciation.
Ooh, I was a little worried there for a second.
I understand. It's easy to get tripped up by these subtle differences in emphasis.
So it's not just about pronouncing the sounds correctly. It's also about putting the stress on the right syllable.
Exactly. Stress patterns can really change the meaning and the impact of a word.
It's like adding a little bit of musicality to our speech.
I love that analogy. It's like we're composing a symphony of sounds.
Okay. I'm officially in love with the art of pronunciation.
Me too.
It's fascinating.
All right, let's keep the symphony going. What's the next word?
This one is often mispronounced in the healthcare field. How do you say it?
I'm ready.
Prescription.
Prescription. Now, I've heard people say prescription, but something about that just doesn't sound right.
You're right. It's not prescription. It's prescription.
Prescription.
Oh.
So the emphasis is on the first syllable.
Yes. And there are only 3 syllables, not 4.
Got it. Prescription. It's amazing how those little stresses and syllable counts can really change the way a word sounds.
They can. And they can also change the meaning of a word.
So we have to be careful.
We do.
Huh.
But it's also fun to play with language and to experiment with different pronunciations.
You know what? I think you've officially turned me into a pronunciation enthusiast. That's what I like to hear. The world needs more pronunciation enthusiasts.
Okay, let's keep this enthusiasm going. What other word do we have time for?
Let's see. How about this one? It's often mispronounced in the context of politics and world affairs.
Okay, bring it on.
Nuclear.
Nuclear.
Yeah.
Now, I've definitely heard people say nuclear.
Yeah, that's a pretty common pronunciation, especially in certain parts of the United States.
But is it correct?
Well, technically, the more accurate pronunciation is nuclear.
Nuclei, with the emphasis on the second syllable.
That's right.
Okay, so nuclear is kind of like the informal version.
You could say that, but in formal settings, like a news broadcast or a political speech, nuclear is definitely the way to go.
It's like choosing the right pronunciation for the occasion.
Exactly. You want to sound informed and credible.
This is making me realize how important pronunciation is in shaping our perceptions of others.
It is. It's a subtle but powerful tool.
Okay, I'm feeling very empowered to use my pronunciation skills for good.
I love that. Go forth and pronounce them.
I will. All right, what's next?
How about a word that's often mispronounced in the context of travel and transportation?
Okay, hit me.
Vehicle.
Vehicle. Now, I've heard people say vehicle, but something about that doesn't sound quite right.
You have a good ear. It's not vehicle, it's V-high-C.
V-H-I-C. So the emphasis is on the second syllable.
Exactly.
It seems like we often get tripped up by those words that have the emphasis on a syllable other than the first.
It's true. Our brains tend to default to that first syllable stress pattern.
So we have to retrain our brains to pay attention to those more unusual stress patterns.
We do, and it's worth the effort.
Okay, I'm ready to put in the effort.
Mm.
What else have you got?
Let's try one more for this section. How about this word? It often comes up in conversations about the environment and climate change.
I'm all ears.
Environment.
Environment. I say environnement with the emphasis on the second syllable.
You are absolutely correct.
Yes, another one I got right.
I'm on a roll.
You are? You're becoming a pronunciation pro?
I'm feeling more confident with every word.
What's the spirit? Okay, so environnement, it's all about that second syllable stress.
Exactly. And it's a word that we need to be pronouncing correctly now more than ever.
I agree. It's a word that's at the forefront of so many important conversations.
Absolutely.
Okay, one last word before we wrap up this section. I'm ready for the grand finale.
All right, here it is. How do you say this word?
Which one?
Jewelry.
Jewelry. Now, I've heard both J.W. Ellery and Joe Ellery.
You have a keen ear for these variations.
Which one is it?
Well, it depends on where you are in the world.
Oh, really?
In American English, Joe-ul-elry is more common.
Okay, I definitely hear that one more often.
But in British English, Joe-ul-elry is the preferred pronunciation.
It's amazing how these subtle differences in pronunciation can really highlight those regional variations.
It's like each dialect has its own unique flavor.
I love that. It's like a linguistic spice rack.
And we're just sampling all the different flavors.
This deep dive has been a delicious feast for my ears.
I'm so glad you're enjoying it.
I am, and I'm excited to keep exploring the world of pronunciation.
Me too. There's always something new to learn.
I can't wait. Wow, I feel like we've covered so much ground already. It's amazing how much there is to learn about pronunciation.
It really is. And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know. It's like a whole new world has opened up to me. It's like I was looking at language through a blurry lens before, and now everything is coming into focus.
That's a great way to put it. It's about sharpening our awareness of the sounds that make up our language and how those sounds can convey so much meaning.
Exactly. It's not just about saying words correctly. It's about understanding the nuances, the subtleties, the way that pronunciation can shape our understanding and our perception of the world.
Absolutely. So what do you think has been the biggest takeaway from our exploration today?
That's a tough one. I think for me, it's the realization that even the most familiar words can have hidden complexities.
I agree with that. You know, we might think we know how to say a word, but then we discover a silent letter or an unexpected stress pattern, and it completely changes our understanding.
It's like those words have been hiding secrets from us all along.
Right. And it's our job as language enthusiasts to uncover those secrets.
I'm loving being a language detective.
Me too. It's a never-ending adventure.
Okay, so we've talked about individual words, but what about the bigger picture? How does pronunciation affect the way we communicate overall?
That's a great question. I think it comes down to clarity and flow. You know, if we're not pronouncing words clearly, it can disrupt the flow of conversation and make it harder for people to understand us.
Right. And it's not just about being understood. It's also about conveying our message in a way that's engaging and effective.
Exactly. Pronunciation plays a huge role in that. It's about using our voices to create rhythm, emphasis, emotion.
It's like we're painting with sound.
I love that analogy. It's so true. And just like with painting, the more skilled we are with our brushstrokes, the more beautiful and impactful our creations will be.
So I guess the takeaway here is that pronunciation is a skill that we can develop and refine over time.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing process, but it's a process that's worth investing in.
This deep dive has definitely inspired me to pay more attention to my pronunciation.
That's wonderful to hear. And I hope it's inspired our listeners as well.
I'm sure it has. So what's one final thought-provoking question that we can leave our listeners with?
How about this? How do these subtle pronunciation shifts over time actually shape the evolution of language itself?
Ooh, that's a good one. It makes you realize that we're all part of this ongoing process of language change.
We are. Every time we speak, we're contributing to the evolution of language.
That's a pretty powerful thought.
It is. It's a reminder that language is never static. It's always in flux, always adapting to the needs of its speakers.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this incredible deep dive into the world of pronunciation.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope you'll join us again soon for another linguistic adventure.
I'm already looking forward to it. Until then, keep those pronunciation muscles flexed. And remember, language is a journey, not a destination.
Well said. Happy speaking, everyone.
Happy speaking. Welcome to your personalized deep dive. We're diving into pronunciation today. You wanted to polish at how you sound, so we put together a list of words that people, even native speakers, trip over. Yeah, get ready for some aha moments. You might be surprised at how many you've been saying wrong.
It's interesting because pronunciation, it's more than just sounding smart. You know, it's about being clear and avoiding those misunderstandings, which can be especially tricky at work in a professional setting.
Oh, totally. I've been there. I once called a colleague's baby adorable, but I think I put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, and it kind of sounded like I was saying the opposite.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's just say I spent the rest of that meeting trying to backpedal.
You see, those little slips can make a big difference. So let's jump into some of the words on the list that really tend to trip people up.
All right, I'm ready. Hit me with a word.
How about February? I bet you say both R's rightly.
Oh, well, yeah, isn't it February?
That's how it's spelled. But a lot of people just say February. They just swallow that first R.
Oh, wow. You're right. I've definitely heard that. I might even do it myself.
It's so common that it sounds almost right, but embracing that first R, I don't know. It just adds a touch more precision. Imagine you're like presenting a timeline for a project. We're aiming to launch in February. Clear and confident.
Yeah, it does make a difference.
Yeah.
Give me another one.
Okay, how about salmon? Do you say the L?
I wouldn't want it to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. So, of course, I say salmon. L. Clear as day.
No, actually, the L is silent. It's salmongina. Just like that.
Seriously. No wonder people look at me funny when I order it.
It's one of those words where the spelling just throws everybody off. Just think about it. I'd love some grilled salmon with asparagus. Rolls right off the tongue.
All right, that one's definitely going to take some practice. What else you got?
Let's do one that often causes confusion. Often. Do you say it with a T, like off-ten?
Yeah. Isn't that how everyone says it?
Well, that is totally fine. Especially in casual conversation, there's another way to say it. Often.
Often. That sounds so formal, like something out of a Jane Austen novel.
Exactly. Using often just adds a little formality, especially in like professional settings or if you really want to emphasize a point. Think about it. We often underestimate the power of simple gestures. It just carries different weight.
It does. It's like picking out the right outfit for different occasions. Sometimes you need a suit and sometimes jeans are fine.
Exactly. The beauty of language is that we have choices.
Yeah.
It lets us adapt how we talk to different situations.
All right, this is blowing my mind already. Are there any other pronunciation pitfalls I should watch out for?
How about one that trips people up when they're ordering their morning coffee? Espresso. Do you pronounce it espresso?
Oh, yeah. That's how I've always said it. What's wrong with that?
It's a pretty common mistake. It's probably because of words like express. But the correct way is espresso with a soft S.
No X. So it's, I'd love a double espresso. That feels weird.
It might take some time to get used to, but imagine walking up to a barista and ordering with confidence, knowing you're using the correct pronunciation. It's like a secret code word for people who really know coffee.
I like that I'm feeling way more confident already. But we've only scratched the surface of this list, haven't we?
We've only just begun. Stay tuned, because in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore even more fascinating mispronunciations and the linguistic reasons behind them. You'll be amazed at what we uncover.
Welcome back to our pronunciation deep dive. We've already uncovered some surprising mispronunciations, and I'm ready for more.
You're in for a treat. We've got some real tongue twisters up next.
Okay, bring it on. What word are we tackling next?
Let's explore a word that so many people stumble over. Comfortable. Do you pronounce all 4 syllables?
Well, yeah, isn't it comfortable?
Technically, yes. But you'll notice that when people are just talking, they often drop that second syllable.
You mean like comfortable?
Exactly. It's really interesting. It's an example of how language changes. While the formal pronunciation is still a thing, the way we speak often favors efficiency.
It's like taking a shortcut with our tongues. We just want to get to the point, even if we have to skip a syllable or two.
That's right. And it makes sense. Imagine saying, I'm feeling comfortable in these new shoes. The shortened version just sounds more natural.
I never thought about it like that. But it's true. Okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here. Sometimes how we say words is more about practicality than about strict rules.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another word that gets streamlined in everyday speech. Athlete. Do you pronounce both ES?
Ooh, this is a tricky one. I used to say athlete, but I realized it's actually athlete. 2 syllables, just like a sprinter to the finish line.
Exactly. Efficient and powerful, just like an athlete. We're seeing a trend here, aren't we? So many of these mispronunciations are from just adding extra sounds where they don't belong. It's like we instinctively try to make words more complex than they need to be.
Yeah, it's fascinating how language changes to become more efficient. What other words have kind of gone through this?
Let's look at jewelry. Do you say jewelry, 3 syllables?
Yeah, honestly, that's how I've always said it. What's wrong with that?
Nothing wrong at all. It's a really common pronunciation. But to be more precise, it's jewelry. 2 syllables, nice and streamlined, just like a beautiful piece of jewelry.
Jewelry. It almost sounds elegant saying it that way, like I'm really appreciating each syllable.
Exactly, and that brings us to a word that trips people up in a really specific way. Escape. Do you ever find yourself adding an extra sound at the beginning? Escape.
Oh my gosh, you're reading my mind. I do that all the time, especially when I'm talking about something exciting, like escaping to a tropical island.
It's a really common slip, but the correct way to say it is nice and simple, escape. Imagine yourself just gliding away from a tricky situation. No need to be dramatic.
Okay, I'm seeing how those subtle changes can change how a word feels. Give me another one. I'm ready to take my pronunciation to the next level.
All right, let's do one that's famous for being mispronounced. Nuclear. Do you ever hear people say nuclear?
All the time. Drives me crazy. It's like they're trying to make it sound cute, which is not what nuclear energy is at all.
Yeah, you're not alone. That pronunciation is incredibly common these days. But we know to say it nuclear, with the power and precision it deserves. Like we're harnessing the energy of the atom itself.
Yeah, it's like taking back control of the word nuclear feels strong and impactful.
Yeah,
Much more fitting for such a complex and powerful concept.
I agree. And while we're talking about complex concepts, let's do a word that's often mispronounced in a way that's almost ironic. Chaos. Ever hear people say chaos?
All the time.
Yeah.
It's like they're adding to the chaos by mispronouncing the word for it.
It's kind of funny, right? But we're all about clarity. Even when talking about disorder, the correct pronunciation is chaos. 2 syllables, just like chaos itself.
Chaos. It's like we're finding order within the chaos. It's great.
And that brings us to our final word for this part of the deep dive. This one's often mispronounced in a way that's kind of endearing. Sherbet. Ever hear anyone add an extra R? Like they're trying to make it sound extra delicious.
Absolutely. Sherbet almost makes it sound more refreshing, but I know it's sherbet. 2 syllables.
Exactly. Light and refreshing, just like sherbet.
We've covered so much ground already. I can't wait to see what other pronunciation gems we find in the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back to the final part of our pronunciation adventure.
Yeah.
We've already debunked some myths and figured out the right way to say some tricky words. But I'm curious, why are these mispronunciations so common in the first place?
That's a great question. It all comes down to the world of linguistics. Remember how we talked about dropping that second syllable in comfortable? Part of that is because spoken language tends to be efficient.
Yeah, we like to take shortcuts even when we talk.
Right. And sometimes how we say words is affected by other words that sound similar. Think about espresso, that extra X sound that so many people add. It's probably because our brains are connecting it to words like express or expensive, where that X is more obvious.
So our brains are like playing a game of word association, and we sometimes get the wrong answer.
I like that analogy. It's all about recognizing patterns, and sometimes those patterns lead us in the wrong direction.
That makes sense. So what about those silent letters? We talk about salmon and almond. Why do we even have those silent L's if we're not going to say them?
Those silent letters are kind of like little time capsules. They're leftovers from older pronunciations that have changed over time. The spelling stayed the same, but the way we say the words shifted.
So it's like a fossil record for language,
Yeah.
showing us how people used to talk. That's cool.
Right. And sometimes mispronunciations come from regional dialects, like that dropped R in February. That's really common in some dialects where they simplify groups of consonants.
So it's not really wrong, just a different way of speaking.
Exactly. Language has so much variety, and those differences make it richer. And then there are times when a mispronunciation becomes so popular that it's almost like a word on its own. Nuclear is a good example. That nuclear pronunciation has been around forever, and some linguists think it's a mix of nuclear and molecular.
Wow, I never knew that. It's amazing how one little slip of the tongue can change our language.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes I think we mispronounce words because we're trying too hard to get them right, like mischievous. That extra syllable pops in because we're over-enunciating, trying to make sure we say every single letter.
It's like we're trying so hard to sound smart that we end up sounding the opposite.
It happens. And we can't forget that language is always changing. What might be a mispronunciation today could be totally normal in the future.
That makes me feel better. It takes the pressure off. So what's the most important thing we've learned from all of this?
I think the main thing is to just be curious about pronunciation and be open to learning. It's not about being perfect. It's about trying to be clear, respecting how language works, and having fun while we're at it.
I love that. I feel like I understand spoken English so much better now. And you know what? Maybe I'll even start using often, more often, just to sound a little fancier.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. It's been eye-opening.